Hello and welcome back to When IT Hits the Fan, sponsored by Rhyno Healthcare Solutions. I'm Christian Patillo. Today I am joined by Joe Orlando, and just from our conversations between our intro call and even before here, I am so excited for the amount of information we are about to get. Both viewers and the guests are going to have to forgive me for my background. I'm moving, and so you're stuck in front of my library, which is D&D manuals and moral theology. Don't worry about it. Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Christian, it's a pleasure, and I thank you very much for inviting me.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Name is Joe Orlando. As you can see from the gray, I've been around quite a few years. I've worked for companies like IBM, Motorola, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and older companies that people have forgotten, like Digital Equipment Corporation. So I've had a very storied career over a very, very long period of time.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey that got you into healthcare IT in the first place?
Well, it's ironic because my career started as a Merrill Lynch investment banker, so finance. And as I was working with a lot of high tech companies and bringing innovations to the marketplace, the only one I think people would know is LoJack, but other companies that came with technologies and said, we need to make something happen. What happened is over time, I wound up getting closer and closer to technology and innovation. And I wound up having clients who said, I need to get this idea to the marketplace. What's the best way to develop it commercially and get it to market? And that's how I moved from finance into IT or computers with Digital Equipment Corporation. And just over the years, it just kept evolving and evolving to where I grew and grew into different areas of specific areas. And cybersecurity was just an evolution. I started with IBM. I was the SME with data warehousing. And one of the things that came from data warehousing is, all right, we have data marts and we have big data. How do we protect it? And in those days, that's how old I am, it was merely encryption. Well, after a while, then we got into data protection. We got into privacy. We got into consent, GDPR. Over the past many years, I've just kind of evolved into being that cybersecurity paranoid guy.
Absolutely. And that's perfect because you've seen it from its birth.
Yes.
So first, let's go over what is your exact job title. Don't share the company. The audience knows that gets a little squeaky noise when people do it. And the second thing is can we go over the purview of your current role?
Sure. I'm an IT operations director, responsible for all the IT operations department, that's system admins, help desk, architecture, and networks and communications, as well as information security across my enterprise. My role is everything from strategy, policy and planning, incident response, if you take it to that side, to upgrades, to just managing everything, including trying to determine the best technologies to either attach or ways to exchange data with other operations within our system. So it's pretty broad in making sure that we stay operational and we stay secure.
And while we're going to be talking in code, I understand that your corporation is very large, very financially stable, if I may imply such things. You don't need to give the exact number of the budget, but when we were in our intro call, just hearing the number made me feel more prosperous. Let me say it that way. But yes, so let's get into what are your current pain points? What are we seeing in the field right now? What has changed in the last couple of years? What's scary?
Well, let me share a couple of data points with you. I'm about to make a presentation to my board because I've been invited to talk about cybersecurity. So you caught me at a good time. I have been collecting data points. Let me share with one. In 2023, there was 133 million healthcare records stolen in cybersecurity breaches. Big year. Already in the first 2 months of 2024, there have been 12 million healthcare records stolen. In the healthcare sector, there's roughly 2,000 attacks on healthcare weekly, every single week. They're getting more creative. And all those numbers I just shared with you don't include Change Healthcare or Lurie's Children's Hospital, which are two large ones. So the big one is that we have much more attacks because they found ransomware is very profitable for them. They found that some of these are medium to small size companies that don't have very sophisticated budgets as well as strategies for healthcare. They found that AI is the brand new tool. The new tool just basically says, I want you to go do this, and AI just goes away, and I can go have a pizza and wait to see what comes back. That's added a whole new element. And then people. That has persistently been the challenge because, for convenience sake, you have people doing things that cause all sorts of problems with regard to system access, giving up credentials, those sorts of things.
Mhm.
You have people, for example, who will want to use their personal device while they're in Starbucks and go in and do banking. And you sit there and realize that you have Wi-Fi sniffers out there that can pick up that information, and then they wonder what happened when their direct deposit got changed to a bank in Montana. So I wound up being the bad guy. I'm the obstacle. I'm the guy who's the curmudgeon when you keep going back and lecturing people saying, when you get that fish email, don't put in your username and password. When you're in the retail store and you see that QR code that says buy me now, be careful because there's a new thing where they put a new QR code over what's on the box in the store. You go online and it takes you to a different website and you put in all your information and then you complain because your TV didn't show up, and that's because it never went to the retailer for that TV. So it's new, it's creative. There are new things happening daily. The job never gets old.
No, no, absolutely not. The evil evolves as fast as the good. I didn't know about the QR code one. It's like a skimmer at a Wawa where you put oof. But they're
Let me
getting
let me
smarter and
share
smarter.
with you. Since we're talking about QR codes, we have all these new phrases. We had phishing, right? We have smishing, which is the SMS text messaging. So the QR code is quishing.
I love it. They are all getting worse and worse.
That's
And
right.
if you thought that a bunch of highly educated technical people would be in a room gravely serious saying the word crishing, I don't know if I ever envisioned that, but that's the world we live in, stranger than fiction.
Amen.
But yes, this was a question we talked about in our pre-interview. But why do you think that healthcare has become? Why does it have such a target on its back at this point? It used to not be attacked quite as much. Is it just because people are realizing how lucrative it is ransomware? Is it because isn't as much honor among thieves? Because before healthcare was off limits because there are lives on the line.
Right.
What do you think it is?
I think what you're finding is they're going to approach the easiest targets they can find. Finance has obviously realized that, gee, they've got to toughen up. They have SEC laws, they have all sorts of FINRA laws. So finance has actually spent a lot of money, invested a great deal of time and effort to be extremely secure. Healthcare, on the other hand, has traditionally focused more on the delivery of healthcare technology and less on the IT and the security side. That's one. But there are very, very few other places that have the plethora of information that I possess. For example, on a specific member, healthcare member, I not only have your name, your address, your date of birth, I know your medical conditions. I could have your driver's license for authentication purposes. I've got your member ID number, your social security number. There's very little, all your family members, your
Yes.
medical proxy. There are very, very few other sources out there that have as much information as I possess about a single individual that could be parsed and sold in 16 different ways. So I could sell the social security number, I could sell the driver's license number, I could sell the date of birth, I could sell the information for identity theft. So it's a honeypot that is far more lucrative to, I shouldn't be telling this to people who are watching this going, oh, I didn't realize that. But it's far more
Luckily,
lucrative.
our audience, yeah, our audience tend to we tend to be on our side of things, but no, I
That's what makes it so attractive is that they're looking at the plethora of information that we have available that could be parsed and used. And it's not only just for that. I could actually envision people taking a medical membership card, finding all the information, duplicating it, and then being able to sell it to different people and say, look, you have coverage because John has coverage, and you just go in and tell him you're John. And
absolutely,
there'll be six Johns going to six different PCPs.
absolutely. Two questions branch off of that. Um, Firstly, I had a data analyst on who just absolutely educated me so much about how in our world, when you log into your banking information, you know how much money you have instantaneously, and you are a single imprint that is kept and tracked throughout nationally. It is not nearly the same as healthcare. Healthcare, you go between one specialty doctor to another ology. They don't know what you have, what you've been prescribed, even the major surgeries you've had. I'm wondering, and you now brought up the difference between finance and healthcare in our security. I'm wondering, what do you think could be done on a major scale to bring our sector closer to finance in both security and data management and just kind of bringing it into the 21st century?
It's very difficult, I think. It's a nice objective, but it's very difficult because we have specialty practices, which are usually maybe one or two doctors and maybe four or five other providers like a PA and nurses. They won't have an IT department. You have the walk-in clinics, you have the emergency care centers, you have the alternative surgical centers, you have again the major hospitals. So the point I'm trying to make is there are so many disparate pieces that you might look at, that it's very difficult to come up with a unified approach that says this is the way everybody can be covered. Because right now, for example, you're let go from the hospital and all your care has been recorded, all that's been taken care of. But then when they release you, they tell you go to the local clinic and go for your follow up. Well, your local clinic's not going to have your medical record. So a new one's going to be created. So now there's a new incident out there. All that information has to be put in all over again. So we're creating little piles of that information, all disparate, all
Mm-hmm.
unprotected in different ways or protected in different ways. Very difficult for us to be able to say like we do in finance, whereas the SEC, the FTC, the FCC, all these players have ways to put out regulations. HIPAA's regulations are suggestions. If you read the HIPAA rules, they don't come out and say you have to encrypt. They don't come out and say you have to. We suggest strongly. It's a nice way to put it. But that means that lets everybody off the hook that says, well, it was only a suggestion. So it's very difficult for us to be able to ensure that the medical information travels safely from place to place. And it's the best we can do, as we do in our organization. We run any partner we share data with through a rigorous series of questions and tests to ensure that the information is traveling through them safely. They can't take it, put it on a thumb drive. They can't share it with a third party. So before we share the information, they have to go through the gauntlet in order to clear it with us.
Would that be one of the criteria in selecting whether your specific payer works with a specific provider?
Absolutely. In fact, it's not only the providers, it's everybody we do business with. So if you're a vendor selling us technology, you'll go through the same thing. If I'm exchanging data with you, if it's just about anybody that I'm giving data to, we'll have to go through this so that we've done our due diligence by regulation that ensures that we've done everything we could possibly do to ensure reasonably that that information is protected, that consent has been covered. I'm sharing it with people that consent is either implied or explicit. So all of those things we go through beforehand.
Absolutely. And what do you think about any current, because technology itself is growing at the rate of people who are trying to get the information and ransom it off. Has there been any major developments in our ability to protect ourselves that are coming out at the speed of people being able to take our information, change healthcare style?
There's a lot going on. One of the key areas in years ago when the gray hair wasn't there, you manually, physically had to sit in a room, and it was usually like a sweatshop where 30 computers were, and everybody banged away, and they tried that firewall, and they tried this, and they tried that. Then chat bots and bots came along, and that was just an automated process to do it. And but the bots had to be directed, they had to be taught, they had to be shown what they want to do. AI is a whole new game because AI is, I'll just give you a challenge and I'll say, what I need you to do is penetrate somebody's, I don't care whose, firewall. Go! And you go have a pizza. We're now doing the same thing on our end and across the industry, looking at AI to look at anomalous network traffic, something that may not have put off an alert, but all of a sudden I see a couple of bytes of data going left when they should all be going straight. I'm looking at different things with the AI that will help me get an idea as to if there is an injection into a SQL server, if there is a man in the middle network bleed, all these little things. Now I don't have to hope that somebody's looking at the monitor. One of my analysts isn't right there catching it. the AI can actually start collecting this and say, I'm seeing a trend or I'm seeing something unusual. That will help us in the long term. So the good and the bad of AI is it's a huge benefit to the malcontents, not yet as much a huge benefit to us since they're calling the shots and we have to be defensive. There's no
Yeah.
offensive play in cyber, uh, not intentional anyway. So for us, it's a matter of saying, okay, how do I anticipate as best I can what they would try and do, and then apply whatever AI I have available to try and recognize it as it's occurring. So that's got a great hope for us going forward. But there's still more there's more development coming in our areas where we're able to secure things more readily, but the game changes daily. I mean, this is constantly somebody wakes up in the morning and comes up with a creative new idea that includes a blue balloon, and we wouldn't have planned on a blue balloon, and boy, all of a sudden we just learned about blue balloons. So it just changes on a daily basis. It's like waking up every morning. Not only does the game change, the rules change, the pitch changes, the ball size changes, everything changes on a daily basis. And it's just hard to know when you're winning.
Absolutely. And you do work for a very large payer that does have a large IT sector, which has its certain benefits, of course. But I've done a lot of these interviews and I've heard the horror stories of how long it takes to stand something up only for it to already be outdated by the day that it goes live. What do you think about that in cybersecurity? Is that less so than in more like, let's say, medical practice technology, or because cyber is a little bit more software? Unless I'm incorrect on that, please do correct me if it's you know.
It's not as difficult as it used to be. There are an abundance of tools. I think the biggest challenge we have is a lot of smaller operations will go for the cheapest, but so they say, well, I'll have something that does endpoint protection, but then I'll buy a different product for data leakage protection. Then I'll buy a different product for Windows for server protection, vulnerability scanning. So when they build this puzzle, then it looks like actually what it sounds like, a patchwork quilt. And it's hard then to manage a cohesive strategy going forward. So it really behooves them to look at their strategy and say, how do I actually look at something that brings it together seamlessly and enables me to manage without having to do pieces parts so that it comes together. And it doesn't have to be overly sophisticated. I mean, the risk to your organization, I mean, encryption to me is the foundation stone of any sort of cybersecurity to me.
Absolutely.
And it's not just the matter of they're going to come in and steal the hard drive. It's a matter of anybody who gets into the network and go in and look at things, they shouldn't be able to get anything and they can't abscond with anything. So even if you just start with simple encryption in the email, at rest, in operation, then you've gone a very long way in protecting what you've got. Then you look at it from the next step, the identity access management, roles access. A lot of these could be done with policy and monitoring. It's not a whole big system. So where I have put in our place a SIM, a security information event management system, I wouldn't say that's for everybody. We're a large organization and we're a very small team in InfoSec, so it really comes into play for consolidating it into a single window. But in a smaller organization or in smaller practices, it's really a matter of a few steps: controlling access, authentication and authorization of access, encrypting the data. So not very many steps do you have to take to say, got it, I'm covered. So it's not a very big challenge.
Excellent. Excellent. So if you were to have a magic wand, and sadly, this magic wand can't take away the bad actors. However, it can change anything on the healthcare IT side of how we run things, how things are done in its from payer to provider, from product to patient. What would be the first things you would change about how we handle data, about how we handle patient care, that would help benefit security in the long run?
I know my answer is going to sound terrible. I'm glad I'm not running for political office. People. The answer is
Look,
people.
it's
My
true.
biggest challenge, our biggest challenge over the last 2 decades is people want to circumvent security because it doesn't matter to them. People want to be convenient. I mean, I don't know how many times I got folks who say, well, I want to check my corporate email, but I don't want to have to carry two phones. I want to do it on my personal device. And then, of course, that phone gets stolen or it gets hijacked on an airplane because somebody's doing a Wi-Fi sniffer. And then they don't understand why I'm yelling at them when they come back to work. people tend to be the ones, and I spend a lot of time in our organization intentionally frightening everybody. I've got it so bad that even emails I send, people will hit the fish button for, going, I'm not sure that's really you. And I'm going, that's great. That's what I want you to do.
No, we love it. Yeah.
So, but I think the biggest challenge is we get complacent. We do it for convenience. We don't necessarily think, and it's not just in their use, it's in their planning and thinking, because it's like, well, I want to go download this software off the web because it's something I want to do. No, 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 we got a problem. Where'd you get the source software from? I have issues now where I've got a department who wants to download videos so that they can put marketing materials together. And it's like, but you're bringing it into my network, and what's embedded in the videos could cause me a great deal of issue. Well, but that's not my problem.
Yeah.
So I'd say, to answer your question, is my biggest challenge is trying to get everybody sensitive and aware. And the only thing that I've seen in the past that makes them hypersensitive is when there's been an attack and they're staying home and not working, and they have to be the ones that look in the mirror saying, well, it was something I did that caused this. And by then it's too late.
No, it is. It simply is. And I'm wondering, what if you do work for a large organization, what might you say to smaller places that don't even have an IT department, to help protect them? What are some either simple ways, or what might they prioritize in their future budgets? Is it important to have an IT team? What would you say to these smaller 1 to 2 doctor practices and small community centers, even elder care centers, things like that? What might you say?
I think it really comes down to having a mantra that keeps in mind the sensitivity of the data. If anything that I have that I'm sharing information on is possibly PHI or personal health information, even PII, name and address, then I should stop for a moment and think about how I'm using the data, even if I'm writing it down, even if I'm sharing it on a piece of paper. It's not necessarily technology, but all of a sudden you have a problem. So it's building that sensitivity to the idea of handling that information. One of the biggest things in a smaller practice that I'm not sure folks have really considered is the HIPAA laws say that you cannot share any PII or PHI to other sources, doesn't matter who they are, if they're not part of your direct medical care and treatment. So what that means then is I give you explicit and implied assent as your patient that you have all this information on me. All right. And then, of course, if that doctor refers me to another doctor, there's that implied consent because it's part of my treatment to have that done, to have that all go over, and therefore it's part of the same chain of custody. A lot of the smaller practices, though, may not practice that as well, may not take care of that as well. So what happens is they're more than happy to provide information to a person who, or individual or group, that is not providing any services to that patient right now. And that means there's a consent issue. So it's not so much a medical issue as much as a privacy issue. And then you have folks who've gotten really good about this. And I'll just give you a fair example is, and this is in the UK, so it wasn't in the US, but you had a contentious divorce going on. And what happened is the wife who was wanting to have the divorce and having problems was able to contact her husband, or soon to be ex-husband's physician, talk about how she has medical proxy and that she wants to have information on his medical record. Well, they wouldn't give it to her because it's her. Well, the attorney calls up and pretends that he's him. He has all the right data for it, says, yeah, here's my birthday, here's my social security number. They sent him the files, and to shorten the story, his files demonstrated he had STDs and his wife didn't. She won the case. So it's little things like that that you have to be sensitive to.
Absolutely. And let's start looking toward the future. What do you think is coming down the pike? What are you optimistic for? What are you pessimistic for?
I think optimistic for me is the use of machine learning so that the machine does some of that thinking. It says it might even help second guess you. Do you really want to do this? I think that would be phenomenal when people do things that they shouldn't be doing. Instead of having me get on their case, I'd like to have a little pop-up window that simply says, really? Really? You want to think about this again? I think that would be phenomenal. The other side of it would be to have some of this done automatically so they don't have to think about it. I can analyze it. I can determine that it is something that's sensitive and at risk, and then I can automatically make what happens happen. We're moving in an area where, for example, if someone has stolen credentials out of, I'm in Tennessee, for example, and my credentials are stolen, and somebody in the British Virgin Isles is trying to get into my system, the technology should be able to look at that and say, Joe's not in the British Virgin Isles, and they can instantly cut off access to my system, ring me up on the phone and say, your information access has been cut off. Please contact me to get your access back and change your password. All those things could happen instantaneously and automatically, which would make life safer, more secure, and easier for everybody.
Well, let's stay with the optimist. We don't need to go to the pessimistic question. You're in cybersecurity. You think of the pessimism all day. Everybody knows what we're talking about. So we are at the 25-minute mark. This is usually where I get the guests a little emotional because I start asking, what advice would you give yourself at the beginning of your career now that you have uh, had so much success? What might you tell yourself early on, a wisdom that you wish you could put in a bottle and throw back in time?
In all candor, I have an ego the size of Montana. Uh, I had always resisted opportunities or never sought out opportunities for a mentor because I thought as a youngster, because I was very young as an investment banker, I was only 22. And
Yeah.
I figured the world, I have to prove to them I deserve this spot. And every job I took after that, I had to continue to feel like I had to prove that I'm capable and that I'm competent. Don't ever ask questions. Don't reach out. That was probably my biggest mistake. Is I could have gone a lot further with a mentor who could have toned me down a little bit, made me less aggressive. But I mean, I think I missed that. It was being able to go to someone I could trust and say, all right, I admit I really don't know what I'm doing here, or what's the best way to go about this. And I just was proving so hard to make sure that no one questioned my competency that I would never necessarily go out and ask for help. That was probably the biggest difference that I would make going forward.
Absolutely. And one last question. It's directed toward people who are new to our sector. Many of us, ding, 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 came on after COVID. And because of that, we don't have as much in office, in command room experience for identical jobs 5 years ago. What might you say to us in a bit of advice, a little bit of uh, uh, good information, good practice? What might you say?
We're at a period of time in technology now that before was not even possible. Back when I was starting out, I'd have to go to the library. I'd have to go study things in books. Right now, almost any topic in the world you can find online and become pretty well adept at. So, for the folks that I mentor, I just use the word date. And they look at me and I said, so date. And they go, what? It don't avoid education and training. That's really the key. Don't stop learning. Don't stop trying to have that thirst for discovering something new. Even today, I have situations where I have to go ask folks who work with me and go, so what's that acronym mean?
Yeah.
And how does this work? Never be shy about saying I don't know. And then do a lot of research. So easy to do now because you can just go on Google and it'll take you to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And before you know it, you've got a plethora of information. You've got a library, gigabytes worth of information. And from that, determine, okay, what area actually excites you most and what area is kind of dull. And you just keep steering towards that. And you say, okay, well, I'm not into getting down and being an analyst and looking at logs and trying to, I'd like to be the engineer that actually turns the switches and makes things going on. Well, then it's easy for you to start looking in that direction. So the access to education is better than it's ever been in the past.
And,
Excuse me.
and dovetailing right off of that, I just wanted to thank you. We're reaching the end of the episode, and the amount of information that you have given and the education you have provided is utterly invaluable. I've said it a million times that this podcast is a cheap cover for me trying to learn my own job. And I really, really, really appreciate you coming on and making the time for us today.
Anytime, and I thank you again for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. This has been another episode of When IT Hits the Fan, sponsored by Rhyno Healthcare Solutions. Thank you all for listening, and tune in next week.